Hello, I'm Bill O'Donnell, and welcome to another program on spirituality. I'm excited today to bring to your attention something that's relatively new to mine, and that is the notion that there is such a thing as an ecology ministry, the ministry of ecology, that part of our spiritual life, we need to be good stewards of the planet, and that's so multidimensional. So to further that end, I'm pleased to introduce my guest, Sister Joan Brown, Franciscan sister working at the Archdiocese of Santa Fe. Welcome, Sister Joan.
Thank you so much. I'm just so pleased to be here and to have the invitation.
Oh,
it's
great.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Well, I've been reading your stuff in the Archdiocesan paper, The People of God, for quite a while, and I was going to call you, and then you called me. So, and we got together, and anyhow, this should be fairly fun, because a lot of people who are so sitting back in their spiritual life, maybe not doing much, probably don't think in terms of being good stewards of the environment is a part of your spiritual life.
It is, and it's like, I think what's happened with our culture that is so consumer-oriented and its commodification of everything, we see a separation between ourselves and the natural world and the relationship of God within that and faith, and that our actions each day are implicated in how we relate to our resources, and that really is an act of faith, and it's a moral act as well.
Yeah. And if you're used to only seeing the most famous, I guess, Franciscan nun on television these days is Mother Angelica and her gang, you notice Sister's habits a little more colorful. No disrespect to Mother, who I have the highest regard for her ministry. But anyhow, the fact is, though, that you are a Franciscan. And tell us a little about your life as a Franciscan.
Okay. Well, I am a Franciscan sister, and my community is based in Rochester, Minnesota, even though I'm from Kansas originally, and my roots are still very, very deep there in the blue stem prairie, grasslands, and farm of Kansas. And in my community, people really are working all over in the United States, and also in Peru and Colombia and in Cambodia. And we do a variety of ministries and works, and it's with ordinary people and everyday people. So my community has, blessed me in doing this work with the earth and with people in this area.
Tell us what it's like, those who have no idea, what's it like to be a nun, to be a religious in that regard, today particularly?
Today. Well, it's being on a real deliberate spiritual path that has an active expression in the world. And in ways it's very similar, say, to like you or anyone who is very serious about their relationship with God and their spiritual life and would like to express that or expresses that in how they live and how they work. And so I live in a house with another sister, and I live in a community actually with two sisters and a layman who wants to be, engaged with us in meditation and prayer every day, and is concerned about some of the same social justice issues we are, and with the earth. And so it's like many people live with some of the same struggles. Yeah,
so it's more normal in the sense of common society, as opposed to the old concept of being a part in a convent.
Right, right, yeah. I live in a neighborhood, in a house, and there I relate to my neighbors, and we have chickens, and I have a garden, and then I work every day, and I have to, make an income to help support the community, the larger Franciscan community, and it's, it's very much engaged spirituality in the world, and a lot of times people don't even realize that I'm a sister by the way I dress.
Well, I think it's fun, and it's important for me to point that out, because a lot of people today, both men and women, are looking for meaning in their lives, and they want to be a part of something. They want to feel like they're not just alone in the world, that there are communities that are very normal and down to earth that actually can and do support you in your life, your personal, your family, and your spiritual life. I think that's wonderful.
Right, and I run into people in my work and in my living who really do want to be connected with groups of people, small groups of people, where they can talk about their spiritual concerns and concerns about the world and what they might do, how they might live, and for support. And in my community, for instance, we have what are called sojourners, who are people, married people, men, women, who are attracted to Francis and Claire in a particular way, and that might mean with the earth, with social justice, with engagement with the economically poor. And so they join us in our sharing of those concerns, and also of spirituality and praying together, and being people in the world on a spiritual path.
Mm-hmm. And for people there who are new to the area, I might point out that it was the Spanish Franciscans who came in here over 400 years ago into what is now New Mexico to bring the Christian faith to this part of the world. And I think that's important to note. And that also, isn't St. Francis the patron, of the Archdiocese of Santa Fe, the city of Holy Faith here?
Right, and St. Francis is, and I always bring in St. Clare, because St. Clare is also part of that.
Yeah.
And that is true that they brought an expression of faith in the Christian faith. With that, though, there were also sins with that need reparation continually, and I have to say in my work I run into that as well. So as St. Francis and Clare were reconcilers and people of nonviolence, and reconciling conflictual situations in their time, and also addressing issues of consumerism and growing mercantilism. That same call in terms of being a Franciscan or a follower of Clare or Francis continues to be the case today. Mm-hmm. And so some of those core values. The other thing is with St. Francis is also the patron of ecology. And a lot of people do not know that. And that brings in the whole element of, Francis in the Canticle of Creation called Sister Water Sister, and Mother Earth, who governs us, and Brother Sun. And some people read that canticle and they think, oh, isn't that nice poetic language? And actually, Francis' life led him to know that in a deep, deep part of his being. And he actually lived that out, and it was like creating or it was like opening us up to a different worldview, and that worldview of kinship, and knowing all as brother and sister. And how might we live if we really felt that and knew that in our beings and in our everyday life? And so I think that's a great challenge, and something that I just continually to take one layer after another off and discover what that means. And that's really been significant for me in the ecology ministry that I do, and how I'm led into that. And I also say Clare had influence in this also, even though the confines she lived in her day were relegated her to a certain area. In her rule for the sisters and living in the monastery, she has written stating that they should not take any more land than they need for their enclosure to protect them, and that of that, part of it needs to remain in wilderness. They should not cultivate any more than what they need, which was a very different philosophy than some of the other monasteries of that time, who were creating all kinds of things that maybe they necessarily didn't need. So there's lots of wisdoms that I think we can just take layer off and apply to our lives today and learn from.
So just a little bit more on your background. You came from Kansas, and you're from farming stock.
I
grew up in
am.
a farm and all that. What led you to become a sister of St. Francis?
Well, that's always such a mysterious thing. I don't know. I wonder sometimes if it was there from the beginning in my birth. But I've always been really drawn to the earth, and living on a farm that sort of naturally happens or can. But within that, then I just had this very deep spiritual connection with the earth as well. And I remember there weren't many trees where I'm from in Kansas. There's, it's lots of blue stem prairie and all, and it's a drier area. So I remember going to this one particular tree, and I would go there and I would reflect and pray to God for guidance and how to live my life and all. And I was always sensitive as a child, kind of on this spiritual journey, I think, from the beginning. And so it just kind of naturally unfolded that I moved into this Franciscan commitment that I'm, you know, very much in the middle of right now. Well,
that's great. I just want to, you know, set the stage because there's so many issues that we're going to talk about.
Right,
the beauty of social justice and ecology is there's no end to this, so we'll launch into it. But one last question: so how did you come to New Mexico?
Well, you know, I'm from Kansas, and so I came to the region after a few years after I graduated from college, and I came as a volunteer to southern Colorado in the Alamosa area. And so with that really was my introduction into New Mexico, because I was almost in New Mexico and northern New Mexico, so I became very acquainted with northern New Mexico, and that was, about 25 years ago. And so, so I worked in southern Colorado for many years, and then I don't know, maybe 15 years ago or so, I ended up working on the border in southern New Mexico, next to Texas and Mexico, and helped begin there a project called Tierra Madre, which is a sustainable straw bale community, a self-help housing project where people who are economically challenged can have a home. And we incorporate straw bale, also solar and water conservation and gray water usage, etc. And so from that ministry, I eventually found myself up here in Albuquerque because we have people in my community here. And I already knew northern New Mexico, and I'd been in southern New Mexico, and it just felt a lot of, the Spirit was really calling me to this area to do this particular work and bring together all my life experiences into that.
Well, this is we're blessed to have you, and the reason I say is because a lot of people don't realize, and I want you to set the stage with this, with the Catholic teaching on this, that as part of our spiritual life, we need to be good stewards of the earth.
Yes, and it goes in stewards in the sense of we're caring for the earth, but then it goes another step, and that other step is what Francis was talking about in terms of kinship or brother and sister. What does it mean if, how do we live as earth community, as seeing all as sacred and brother and sister? And if we have that within our beings, then we will be good stewards. And it's not a mechanical thing of, oh, I am going to conserve water and feel very self-righteous and good that I'm conserving water. But it's like seeing the sacramental commons, the sacredness of that. Sort of like, you are sacred because you're my brother. Well, all of these elements are, and they're all created by God, and that's why they're sacred. And so, so it's within the Catholic, it's within Scripture. It's in the Old Testament, it's in the New Testament. I always like to look at Jesus when he was being called to discern his ministry. He didn't go to the synagogue for 40 days. In all of the passages, it says he was called, or he was empowered, or he was beckoned by the Spirit into the desert or into the wilderness. And he was there for 40 days. And it was a very profound, clarifying, discerning time for him in his relationship with God and his call. So we have it in Scripture, we have it in the saints. I've already mentioned St. Francis, St. Clare, and then we have Julian of Norwich, we have Meister Eckhart, we have St. Augustine, we have Aquinas, we have, I mean, it goes on and on. And then also, more recently, in the Catholic social teachings. And most people don't realize that with our last Pope, Pope John Paul II, he is part of or responsible for volumes of documents, talks, writings on the need to be ecologically minded, the sacredness of the environment, and our human responsibility, and how we need to address the issues of consumerism and our being out of balance that are the reasons why we're running into what are called ecological or environmental crisis, which he really called soul crisis, spiritual crisis. And that's what's underlying it, and we need to get to that place in order to really address these larger issues of ecology and environment.
Yeah. Talk a little more about that. I think it was very important. It's almost, in a secular way, it would be consciousness. You know, even people who are not religious or spiritually oriented, it's still your consciousness that really is your motivating force on whether you're going to be environmentally aware and act appropriately as a result of it.
And the consciousness is formed by religious tradition for the most part in our families, and the religious tradition within our families, within our communities. And that consciousness is a deep awareness, and I hate to say this, but in our own culture, maybe a thin awareness of who we are, and that is out of which we make decisions, and everyday decisions, like how much do I drive a car, where do I drive it, how do I use this water, do I conserve it, what food do I eat, and so that comes out of our consciousness, out of our awareness, and that deeply is part of our spirituality and our spiritual journey. And all of that has foundation in these deep traditions for myself, and can for many people, but we're just not aware of those deep traditions. So we live in what I call sort of a flatland spirituality, where things are very thin, like a veneer, rather than having these deep roots that we can draw on, that can inform us and then can affect our lives in the culture, and ultimately address some of these huge, huge challenges that we are facing that affect people, future generations, the children, the earth.
Yeah. I have a confession to make to you. In our tradition of sin and grace as a way of developing consciousness, I mean, sin not meaning bad or wrong, but literally missing the mark, deciding where I am missing the mark is my responsibility of whether it's a sin or not. And a new sin that I've become aware of for myself is if I have the opportunity to recycle and I don't. For me, I feel I'm missing the mark, and now I'm compelled for myself to, and fortunately here in Santa Fe we have recycling, so I'm able to do that, and I'll even bring things home if someone doesn't have that, so that I can take advantage of that recycling. I know it's just a start, but it was something out of our tradition. People dismiss the whole notion of sin or grace in that sense, but I feel good about it when I do it, and if I don't, I feel not bad, but I know that I'm missing the mark and I should be doing it.
Right, and it's that kind of missing the mark, and it's because you have a consciousness and awareness. And so if we have that and we know that we're not living in that manner, that's like a check to us, and says, or like many people in the past have called it an examen of conscience. At the end of the day, to make this examen of conscience, which is going through my day and how did I live faithfully, what were the good things and what were the things where I missed the mark. And so for myself, an example of this is I am so conscious of water, and I'm conscious of, when I drink water, when I use water, am I using too much water? Am I recycling the water even? And so again, it's that kind of consciousness. When I eat food, I work with the National Catholic Rural Life Conference that has wonderful things, and they have this wonderful campaign now called Eating is a Moral Act.
Eating is a moral act. I love that.
Eating is a moral act.
Yeah. And
what it does is it takes this ordinary but very sacred thing that we do, usually 3 times a day, some of us maybe more than that, and looks at it in just the way you're saying, of consciousness, of awareness. What do I eat? In what I'm eating, is it supporting like the local economy? Is it supporting farmers to have a just wage, a just living? Is it promoting respectful use of the water, of the land? Are these seeds that are being cherished, or are they genetically modified seeds that ultimately are not good for people of many cultures, and also perhaps not good for our health? So it's like eaters have rights in Eating is a Moral Act. The workers have rights. The water has a right. The earth has a right. The seeds have a right. And it's all because, all are sacred. And it's part of the sacramental commons again. And so this Eating is a Moral Act, I love this campaign because it's something everybody can do.
Yeah.
It's just, again, raising our awareness and our mindfulness and what we already have within the Catholic tradition as seeing everything as sacred, but we have blinders on our eyes. We kind of need this new worldview in order to, and once we have that, or once we go there, everything takes on more meaning. And so I hear a lot of times people feel like, oh, my life has no meaning, or I'm just so busy and everything just seems like a drudge, and you know, I need something new in my life. And so we have all kinds of things that we do, addictions and other things, to create something exciting or new in our lives. And in actuality, if we were more mindful of these ordinary things, it's like all of this sacredness and mystery and wonder open up to us in a simple thing like drinking a glass of water or eating my evening meal. And then when you add to it the community around the table, it's like, oh, you know, it's like shedding the scales from one's eyes. And then we begin to respond differently and to be what you're saying about those stewards of creation as well.
All right. Listen, if you just joined us, we're having a conversation with Sister Joan Brown, Franciscan nun working in the Archdiocese of Santa Fe currently, and she is the Ecology Minister for and established the ministry under social justice at the Archdiocese of Santa Fe. Before I go too far, we've talked a little about it because it seems like a specialized area within social justice. Can you give us more of the broader context of what are the issues within social justice that the Church is working in or is concerned about?
Okay. Well, actually, there's a whole panorama of issues in social justice. It comes to human rights issues, which involve, you know, labor, issues of health care, making sure that children and people have enough to eat, food, environmental justice issues regarding in economically poor areas, which we certainly know in this state, there are often waste dumps in those poor areas. So there's those issues. There are the issues of peace and disarmament. Issues of how we're treating our neighbors in other countries with globalization and economy. Those are growing large issues that are also implicated. And the interesting thing that I find with all of those social justice issues, no matter what they are, for me, a common thread seems to be the ecology issue. Because with that, I like to call ecology rather than environmental ministry, because it comes from the root word oikos, which means home. And interestingly enough, oikos or eco is the same root word for economy. And so ecology and economy have to go together. And even when we start talking about issues of war and peace, they come down to a struggle for limited resources more and more. And so we're going to be having more and more country conflicts, world conflicts, because of these struggles for resources. So we probably will have more wars. I think in this particular Southwest region, the water issue will be one that will be, you know, having conflicts over and war. So this ecology issue and the resources and how we relate as people and with the earth and what we need and our economy all kind of converge here. And it's how we care for our home, God's home, where we live.
And the Church is right in the middle of it.
Yeah,
All the churches.
So. I think so. You know, the churches, no matter what spiritual tradition it is, I believe this is very strongly that this is something that is core and will continue to grow in the need to be more core, and our awareness growing in that and drawing on the deep spiritual roots and traditions and ancestry in order to live that out in contemporary times.
Yeah, there's so much to think about. So if you're just catching us now, we're at the end of what's going to be part one. We're going to have Sister Joan come back, and we're going to get into a lot of those issues. There are so many, we just couldn't do it in one segment. So be sure and tell your friends to stay tuned next time for Spirituality TV, because we're going to do part two with Sister Joan and talk about a lot of those issues that you're concerned with, or that we should be concerned with, and that the society needs to make adjustments with, and that we need to just raise our consciousness and become more aware. One of the things that you mentioned, I know that just in saving water or doing that, I keep a bucket next to my shower, so when I'm catching the cold water before the hot water comes in, I use it to, you know, flush the toilet or something like that. There's so many little things. Or if I get it filled up, I can use it on my plants outside or whatever, or just save it for some other use. And that's just one thing.
Right, and what happens once we begin doing those things on a very personal, everyday basis, oftentimes it leads us to say, what else can I do? And that leads us to a next step of engagement with some structural change, which is very much within the Catholic social teachings and deals with some policy on local levels, community levels, and the federal level, and even international level. So one step leads to the next, and then they all kind of are going on simultaneously, and we find ourselves more in a place of balance rather than disconnectedness. But I think, again, to go to that and why you've chosen to do that is probably because of this place inside you that is moved and sees the sacredness and God as the creator, and that all of this is very important. And so you feel a relationship with that water and with the natural world. And Thomas Berry, who is a Passionist priest, whom I've learned a great deal from his writings and from retreats I've been with him, you know, speaks about that, and that this whole area of intimacy and seeing our connection with the natural world and the sacredness there and God present has to be there in order for us to be about this transformative work as human beings and seeing ourselves in a new way with a new identity.
Yeah. Well, I want to give credit where credit's due. When I was a law student in Sacramento back in the 70s, we had a lot of drought concerns, and we were doing, I was hosting an environmental law forum with the Department of Water Resources and others in that, and we really were trying to look at it just from a pragmatic view. But it was my dad, actually, who I watched take his water from his bath, and he saved it in buckets to use out in his plants. So I want to give credit where credit due. But hopefully today, in these times, we'll take lessons from wherever we get them.
Right.
And that's one of the reasons I've had you here. So just in the couple of minutes we have remaining, what would you like to say to set them up for next week when we get into some of the hardcore issues facing us?
Okay. Well, I guess what we're going to talk about more is this change of our worldview and how we move into that, and then what things might help us. And there are several programs that I'm working with and working on to help with that, with children, with adults. And there's the Stewards of Creation. We have a conference every year. I'm doing Earth retreats with children. There's something I call Sacred Ecology, Sacred Homemaking. So it's these ordinary ways and communal ways that can engage us and then move into this more deeply, and the ecology and our being, all of us being ecology ministers, actually.
Okay, great. Well, that's a good place to leave it. So I want to thank you for viewing. Stay tuned. Watch the credits, and you'll get Sister Joan's address at the Archdiocese of Santa Fe and how to contact her. Or you can go to the Archdiocese website and find out more information about the church and what it's doing. But also plan to stay tuned next week at this time for the part 2 of this discussion. We'll get into more of those details, and we'd love to hear your thoughts on it. So please also contact us and let us know what you think of this kind of programming and if you want us to continue. So on behalf of everybody here at Spirituality TV, I want to thank my director, Marshall, and George Marvin in technical support, and Connie and John Paul, our camera people, and everybody behind the scenes, and want to thank you for viewing. So stay tuned next week for part 2 of Sister Joan Brown and Ecology Ministry here on Spirituality TV. Thank you for viewing.